What separates a calculated gamble from highway robbery? And when does a controversial trade transform into an absolute masterclass in asset acquisition? Buckle up, because we're about to dissect one of the most spectacularly one-sided trades in recent NHL history, a transaction that looked questionable at the time and has aged like fine wine for the New York Islanders while turning into spoiled milk for the Vancouver Canucks. This isn't just about one team winning a trade. This is about organizational philosophy, asset evaluation, and the brutal reality that sometimes hindsight doesn't just prove you wrong, it humiliates you. January 30th, 2023, a date that will live in infamy for Canucks fans and be celebrated in Islanders lore. Lou Lamoriello, the legendary GM who's forgotten more about hockey than most people will ever know, executed what appeared to be a bold, some said reckless, pre-deadline strike. He acquired Bo Horvat, Vancouver's captain and pending unrestricted free agent, in exchange for Anthony Beauvillier, prospect Adorati, and a conditional first-round pick. The immediate reaction? Absolute pandemonium. Critics emerged from every corner of the hockey world, sharpening their knives for Lamoriello. Overpay, they screamed. Desperate move, they proclaimed. The narrative was set. The Islanders had mortgaged their future for a rental player who'd scored just 7 goals in his final 30 games with Vancouver. The math seemed simple. Horvat was trending downward, and the Islanders had surrendered significant assets for damaged goods. But here's where the story gets delicious. Those critics were spectacularly, embarrassingly wrong. And the evidence of their miscalculation grows more damning with each passing season. Let's examine the cold, hard production numbers that tell the real story. After that admittedly concerning 7-goal stretch in his final 30 games with Vancouver, Horvat has been nothing short of spectacular in an Islanders uniform. We're talking about sustained, elite-level production that validates every ounce of faith Lamoriello placed in him. 2023-24, 33 goals in 81 games, a legitimate first-line center performance. 2024-25, 28 goals despite the Islanders enduring what can only be described as a dreadful campaign. 2025-26, current 14 goals in just 23 games, projecting to a career-high 49 goals over 82 games. Bo Horvat Islanders scoring highlight. Let that sink in for a moment. Horvat is currently on pace for 49 goals. That's elite territory. That's franchise player production. That's the kind of output that wins you hardware and carries teams deep into the playoffs. Over 215 games in an Islander sweater, Horvat has deposited 82 pucks into opposing nets, an average of 31 goals per 82-game season. That's consistent, reliable, game-changing offensive production. But the numbers only tell part of the story. Horvat hasn't just scored goals. He's provided leadership, stability, and exactly the kind of two-way center play that championship teams are built around. He's been, as the saying goes, money in the bank. Reliable, consistent, exactly what you want from a significant acquisition. The Islanders didn't just win this trade. They secured a cornerstone piece who's entering his prime years and showing no signs of decline. Lamoriello's supposed overpay looks more like grand larceny with each passing game. Now, let's turn our attention to what Vancouver received in return, because this is where the trade transforms from Islanders win to absolute fleecing. The Canucks return package has been nothing short of catastrophic, a case study in how assets can evaporate faster than morning dew under the summer sun. Beauvillier was supposed to provide immediate NHL-level production, partially offsetting the loss of Horvat. The reality? He managed 11 goals and 28 points across 55 games in parts of 2 seasons. Respectable, but thoroughly underwhelming for a player meant to fill the void left by your departing captain. But here's where it gets truly painful. The Canucks then flipped Beauvillier to the Chicago Blackhawks for what was supposed to be a conditional 5th-round pick in the 2024 draft. Except the conditions weren't met, so Vancouver didn't even get that measly 5th-rounder. They got nothing. Zero. Zilch. Beauvillier's entire contribution to the organization amounted to 11 goals, and then disappearing into the ether without leaving behind any future assets. Think about that for a second. One of the 3 pieces you received for your franchise captain ultimately netted you absolutely nothing of lasting value. That's not just poor asset management, that's organizational negligence. Rady represented the future, the potential long-term replacement for Horvat. A second-round pick from 2021, he carried significant prospect pedigree and was considered one of the Islanders' top young players. The Canucks envisioned him developing into a top-six center who could anchor their lineup for years to come. Fast forward to today. Rady has managed 8 goals and 18 points across 57 NHL games. This season, he's contributed 1 goal and 6 points in 21 games. At 23 years old, he's been given every opportunity to establish himself as an NHL regular, and he's failed to seize any of them. Now, to be fair, there's an argument that Vancouver's player development system deserves some blame. Perhaps in a different organization with different coaching and development infrastructure, Rady blossoms into the player his draft pedigree suggested, but that's cold comfort for Canucks fans watching him struggle while Horvat lights up scoreboards in Long Island. The harsh reality: unless Rady undergoes a miraculous transformation and becomes a Hart Trophy candidate, and let's be honest, that's not happening. He represents a massive disappointment relative to expectations. The centerpiece prospect of the return package has been a bust. Here's where the story takes an almost comical turn into tragedy. The first-round pick Vancouver received was top 12 protected. When the Islanders made the playoffs in 2022-23, that protection kicked in and the pick was deferred. But rather than holding onto it and waiting for its value to materialize, the Canucks included it in the trade package that brought Filip Hronek from the Detroit Red Wings. The Red Wings used that pick, originally Vancouver's return for Horvat, to select defenseman Axel Sandin-Pellikka. And here's the kicker. Sandin-Pellikka is now a fixture on Detroit's blue line and projects as a cornerstone piece of their future defensive core. He looks like a legitimate top-pairing defenseman in the making. So, let's recap this particular piece of the puzzle. Vancouver traded their captain for assets that included a first-round pick, which they then traded away, which another team used to draft what appears to be a future star defenseman. The Canucks essentially facilitated Detroit's acquisition of a premium prospect while getting nothing of comparable value themselves. What makes this trade so fascinating from an analytical perspective is what it reveals about organizational decision-making and risk assessment. The Islanders and Canucks approached the same situation with fundamentally different philosophies, and the results speak volumes about which approach works. Lamoriello looked at Horvat's 7-goal slump in his final 30 games with Vancouver and saw through the noise. He recognized that goal-scoring variance is real, that talented players go through cold stretches, and that Horvat's underlying skills and track record suggested the downturn was temporary. He had the conviction to act decisively, the cap space to sign Horvat long-term, and the organizational infrastructure to maximize his abilities. That's elite-level management. That's the difference between good GMs and great ones. The ability to identify value when others see risk, to commit resources when others hesitate, to trust your evaluation process even when the immediate optics are unfavorable. Vancouver, conversely, looked at the same situation and panicked. They weren't confident in re-signing Horvat, so they moved him. Fair enough. Losing him for nothing in free agency would have been organizational malpractice. But then they completely botched the asset management that followed. They acquired Beauvillier and failed to extract any lasting value before trading him for literally nothing. They got Rady and haven't developed him into an NHL contributor. They received a first-round pick and immediately flipped it in another trade, watching it become another team's blue-chip prospect. At every decision point following the initial Horvat trade, Vancouver made the wrong choice. That's not bad luck, that's systemic organizational failure. What's particularly damning about Vancouver's handling of this situation is how each poor decision compounded the previous one. It's not just that they lost the Horvat trade, it's that they then proceeded to lose every subsequent transaction involving the assets they received. If they'd held onto Beauvillier and extracted 20 goals per season from him, the trade looks better. If Rady had developed into even a solid third-line center, there's some consolation. If they'd kept that first-round pick and drafted their own future star, the narrative shifts. But none of those things happened. Instead, we're left with a scenario where Vancouver traded their captain and franchise center, and 3 years later, they have almost nothing to show for it except regret and what-ifs. Let's do the cold, analytical comparison that makes this trade's lopsidedness crystal clear. 215 games from Horvat, 82 goals, and counting a signed, long-term contract with a player in his prime leadership and two-way play, a player currently on pace for a career year. Canucks received 55 games and 11 goals from Bo Horvat, who then left for nothing. 57 games and 8 goals from Rady, who hasn't established himself as an NHL regular. A first-round pick they immediately traded away, which became another team's top prospect. Vancouver Canucks disappointed fans. The value extraction disparity is staggering. The Islanders got exactly what they paid for, and more. The Canucks got a fraction of the expected return, and then mismanaged even those limited assets. This trade offers several crucial lessons for NHL front offices. Trust your evaluation process. Lamoriello didn't panic when Horvat hit a cold stretch. He trusted his scouting, his analytics, his organizational assessment. That conviction paid massive dividends. Asset management doesn't end with the trade. Acquiring assets is only half the battle. Vancouver's failure to maximize value from Beauvillier, develop Rady, or properly utilize the first-round pick demonstrates that post-trade management is equally critical. Player development infrastructure matters. Whether Rady's struggles are entirely his fault or partially attributable to Vancouver's development system, the result is the same. A high-value prospect failed to materialize into an NHL contributor. Short-term thinking destroys long-term value. Vancouver's decision to immediately flip the first-round pick in another trade suggests short-term thinking that undermined their long-term asset base. Unless Atta Rady undergoes a miraculous transformation and becomes a perennial all-star, and we all know that's not happening, there's simply no way to spin this trade as anything other than a complete and total fleecing. The Islanders didn't just win this trade. They dominated it so thoroughly that it should be used as a case study in business schools and hockey operations seminars. Lou Lamoriello, the man who was criticized for overpaying, looks like a genius. His supposed desperate move was actually a calculated strike that secured a franchise center at the peak of his powers. Meanwhile, Vancouver's return package has evaporated like smoke, leaving behind nothing but regret and missed opportunities. The numbers don't lie. The production doesn't lie. The asset management outcomes don't lie. This trade will be remembered as one of the most lopsided transactions of the decade. Reminder that sometimes the conventional wisdom is spectacularly wrong, and the criticized decision-maker is actually playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers. 3 years removed from this trade, the verdict is unambiguous and damning. The New York Islanders acquired a legitimate franchise center who's currently producing at a career-best pace. The Vancouver Canucks receive a package of assets that they systematically mismanaged into oblivion, leaving them with virtually nothing of lasting value. This isn't just about one team winning a trade. It's about organizational competence, decision-making processes, and the brutal reality that in professional sports, mistakes compound and excellence gets rewarded. The Islanders demonstrated excellence. The Canucks demonstrated the opposite. As Horvat continues lighting up opposing goaltenders and the remnants of Vancouver's return package fade into irrelevance, this trade will stand as a monument to the importance of conviction, proper evaluation, and competent asset management. Lou Lamoriello took the criticism, trusted his process, and emerged victorious. The Canucks took their assets and watched them disintegrate. That's not just winning a trade. That's a masterclass in how to fleece an opponent while they're too busy second-guessing themselves to realize they're being robbed blind. What's your take on this trade? Did the Canucks ever have a chance to salvage value from this package, or was it doomed from the moment they accepted the deal? Drop your analysis in the comments below, and if you're as fascinated by this organizational competence disparity as I am, smash that like button. This is the kind of front office chess match that separates championship organizations from perpetual rebuilders. And we just witnessed a masterclass in execution versus catastrophe.